Okay, let me get this out of the way. Welcome, everybody. This evening, we're going to be talking about a comparison of pale American styles, which includes American Blonde Ale and then also American Pale Ale. So this should be fun. Hopefully, many of you have already got a couple of these various beers in your hands. At least with regard to typical commercial styles. I've got this, what is it, Kona Big Wave, a very nice beer. I've never had it before, and it's very, very pleasant. I've also got and this is the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, the progenitor of what we now call American Pale, or at least the great spreader. But let's get into that discussion. So let's talk, and I welcome some inputs from the THC Club up in Lafayette. Todd forwarded me some slides, and some of them were very helpful. So I have plagiarized the heck out of them, and let's take a peek at this one, which is from THC, and of course. This is talking about pale ales, and we can talk about the genesis of the pale ale and what it means to the creation of American Pale Ale and other similar styles. So the name Pale Ale probably originated because that malt was paler than others. It was before the advent of Coke. Heating. Coke, by Coke I mean like coal that burns cleanly without any smoke and all that good stuff. Before that time, it was very difficult to create a non-smoky and a relatively very pale malt. So when you make a beer with a pale malt, you get a relatively pale ale, as we all know. And if you read down, you'll see that the pale ale was started in the early 1700s, and by the 1800s, the British had largely replaced that term with bitter. And of course, we being Americans, we decided we'd one up the British, and we started craft brewers started creating versions of these best bitters and strong bitters, and created first Anchor Brewing created the Liberty Ale in 1975, and then Sierra Nevada created their pale ale in 1980. And I have to admit that the first time I ever had the SNPA was in Lake Tahoe, I think in the very, very early 90s. So I guess it was well known in the far west, but me being from Florida, boy, that was something very unique and eye-opening. That really sort of set the hook for me. So let's look at what it means and the differences between the American Pale Ale and the English Pale Ale, aka the strong bitter. And of course, that the EPA strong bitter is epitomized by Bass Ale, as well as, I believe, Fuller's ESB. And an EPA has more malt and more caramel flavor than an APA. An EPA has more of a fruity yeast ester character, so the yeast produces more esters. EPAs, of course, use English hops, and we American brewers are proud of our American hops, so we're using them. EPAs are just a little bit darker, just maybe 4 or 5 SRM at the most darker. And the bottom line here is that APA is designed to showcase American hops. So we'll get into this in just a moment. Okay, so let's look at this pretty slide again from THC. I include it just because, well, it's pretty. I have to admit that I really like the Sierra Nevada Pale Ale labeling, and I really enjoy a lot of their old uh, beer color or labeling. You know, their porter used to come in this blue color label, and the stout I think was brown colored label, and the pale ale always had the green. So it's really a send back. But as you can see, they're using a very simple grist in SNPA, and I create what I consider an SNPA clone, and it's similar 60-degree caramel and regular old two-row pale ale, and away you go. And then you layer on the Cascade, and you've got a really nice beer. So let's talk about the comparison of these two styles. They are very, very similar, although their focus is a bit different. The Blonde Ale is a slightly smaller beer, typically coming in roughly a percent ABV lower, and it's ever so slightly lighter than the American Pale Ale. So it's similar but slightly different. The big difference, though, is in the bittering. The Blonde Ale is not intended to be a very bitter beer at all, and the American Pale Ale is. And you can see that in the IBU ratings. So I like to say, you know, Blonde Ale it's well, pretty much your training wheels beer. It's intended to be, or it was originally intended to be, an easy drinking, approachable, malt oriented ale with interesting but not aggressive flavors. So here's the Kona Big Wave, and I would say it's maybe not as malt oriented as I was expecting, but it has a very pleasant American hop character. Uh, Very pleasant. And again, you could probably see that it is a bit paler than this Sierra Nevada. So you should probably see that bit of difference there. But I have to admit that this particular Big Wave may not be as malty as I was really expecting, but it's really good. Me being a hophead, I don't mind this beer at all. So ingredient comparison. Number one, there we go. I'm not sure why that was that way, but anyhow. Okay. With regard to the characteristic ingredients, both of these beers are extremely similar. Pale malt with light character malts, and in the case of the Blonde Ale, those light character malts are typically more the biscuit, biscuity, bready kind of malts, not necessarily caramel malts. And that compares to American Pale, where their character malts typically are a little bit of crystal malt. The hop character in a Blonde Ale, it's really supposed to be very modest, and it can be any variety. In the case of this Big Wave, it is clearly an American hop. Anybody got an opinion on what hop it might be? Because it's definitely coming across citrusy, little grapefruity. So I'm just assuming it's in that Cascade Centennial range, maybe a hint of Chinook. But then this compares to the American Pale Ale, where you have moderate to high bittering, and as well as pretty substantial hop flavor and aroma. And for an American Pale Ale to be classified an American Pale Ale, it really must have American hops or New World hops. And by that, I mean like the hops from New Zealand in the southern hemisphere. So good stuff. Malt character, blonde ale, malty sweetness with just that touch of bread, toast, or biscuit, and low or no caramel. And in the APA, you're looking at clean, grainy malt flavor that supports the hops, but's not too caramelly. I've actually dealt with or experimented with pale ale grists, and I thought I was onto something new, and I just kept creating these nasty little kludges that sort of the point was that you can't have too complex a malt bill and malt flavor, because then you can't taste the hops. So, and the whole purpose of this style is tasting hops. Okay, and let's talk about some water, since it is me. There is a reason why a pale ale tends to taste the way it does, and that's because it does have to have a relatively dry finish. In the case of, say, this typical pale ale water profile, you've got, a little bit more calcium than in the blonde ale. But most importantly, you've got a bunch more sulfate. So that will produce a substantially drier finish. And that dry finish is what allows the hop bittering and flavor flavor, and then ultimately the aroma too, to come through on your palate and for you to perceive it very well. Contrast to the typical blonde ale profile that's it's got a little bit of sulfate, got a little bit of chloride, nothing special. But I can tell you that for a pale ale to really pop, you're going to need 100, 200 parts per million sulfate just to get it to dry out enough to allow the beer to really be enjoyable and characteristic of the style. So with that, do we have any examples? And I guess we can start talking about some of these various examples that everybody's got at the meeting today. Tom, what you got?
All right. I've got the Kona Big Wave also. And then for my American Pale Ale, I actually have Dale's Pale Ale. So
that's good stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I haven't had it
a while since I've had that.
Yeah, it's been at least a couple of years since I have.
Still tasting good?
Acceptable.
Acceptable. And I have to admit that, so this is the Sierra Nevada, and I have to admit that I'm not sure what the date on that beer was, but it's not quite right. Not quite as fresh and pure as I really expected. I'm not sure where the thing is, but anyhow, Jeff, what do you got?
I have the Kona also, Big Wave. So it's pretty tasty. I haven't had that for several years. So that was nice, refreshing, getting a little like lemon and maybe some like orange blossom, a little bit, bready malt. Good. And I also have the Sierra Nevada also. So I copied off of you, Martin, two of the style guideline examples. So I haven't cracked it open yet though. So finishing my Kona first.
Now, Dana, you mentioned you've got what, 6-foot blonde? Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, we've got the 6-foot blonde from Clop On here, and it's very light. It's doesn't have much hop aroma or flavor at all. Look how light it is.
Well, that sounds like it's probably truly in style then. Whereas
I would say so.
the Kona might be a little bit beyond style.
It doesn't have much caramel or anything, really. It's sort of uneventful for me.
And when I read the BJCP guidelines for blonde ale, I think that's what it's intended to be.
At least with the, you get a Budweiser or a Miller, a Pilsner. It's got some flavor from the adjuncts, the corn or whatever. But I think if they added something like that to this, they'd get a good Pilsner. Oh, and I have a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale too.
Cyrus.
That's I have a refrigerator full of it actually.
SNPA? Well, we'll all be over. Well, I thought you said you had Osiris.
Yeah, I have Osiris too. I'm not as fond of Osiris as I am the Sierra Nevada. I think it's a little more hoppier and probably more maltier than the Sierra Nevada. So, but it's still a pretty good pale ale.
And Todd, have you been brewing something lately?
I have. I've been brewing a lot recently, so but I didn't brew anything for this meeting. I actually had the Big Wave Kona as well, and I bought it at my Kroger up here today, and it was tasty. It was real mild, but I look at the bottle on that one, and mine was actually bottled back on the 26th of September last year, so it's got a little teeth on it in terms of age, but it still was quite delightful. And then for my other one, I have a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale as well. You can't really see it, I guess. But
it disappears in your
yeah, exactly.
background.
But I also swung by, and because I live right down the street from Tage River, where Jason Cook is the brewer, and so I picked up his Pliocene Pale Ale, which I haven't opened yet, and then he also has one called the Golden Years Golden Ale. So I'm looking forward to trying those later on in the meeting. So I haven't cracked them open yet, but they're also something I may try tonight. So pretty good.
Do you figure that golden ale is a blonde, or is it one of those new golden styles?
I really don't know. I have to go. Go ahead.
It's a British
Go ahead,
golden.
Is it?
Is it?
Could be a British golden.
Yeah, it says in the back. It says light in body and quite refreshing. Our golden ale is a perfect for it's just talking about the occasion. It doesn't talk about the style. I could text it and find out what it is real quick. But it is a golden ale. So go ahead.
Are those cans that they make?
Yeah, they have 16-ounce cans they're doing now. And they're just basically wrapped. So they're a standard aluminum can, and if you can see it. Can't see it very closely here, but
Good.
yeah, it's pretty good. This is his pale ale. They're selling 6-packs now that have a mixed 6-pack of 16 ounces. So it's an interesting buy. So yeah, I'll try it and see how that tastes a little later on. But yes, I have been brewing, Martin. I have a whole bunch of stuff, but nothing pale or golden.
Well, you're doing better than me.
I think I've done 5 batches this year so far, so I've done a lot.
This year, we're 1 month in.
That is true. I'm on track. I hit my 40 brews last year, so I'm looking to do it again this year.
What do you point it down the drain, or whose gullet are you pointing it down?
I have lots of friends who are thirsty. Give away beer, you make lots of friends.
That's the thing that's killing me is that everybody's in seclusion, so it's like I can't share with anybody.
I do a beer Santa where I just drop a 6-pack off at their door, ring the doorbell, and leave. So you don't have to see them. You can do it in seclusion, Martin. Except you get good at washing bottles.
God, I'll send you my address. You can just drop some off.
I'd be happy to.
Charlie, what have you been brewing? Got any APAs or blondes?
This is I've got my I've called it New Year's beer. Here, let me unmute completely, and I can tell you it's. I think I can hit it mostly. It's 50% two-row, 30% Maris-Otter, 10% Vienna, 5 to 7% biscuit, and about 2% Crystal 40. That's the malt bill on it, and a Magnum for a bittering hop, and then it's got Amarillo, Simcoe, Centennial, Citra, and Cascade in it. Lots of dry hop. Came out real nice.
Is it intended to be a pale ale or an IPA?
It's probably a lighter IPA. The initial grab was 1060 and finished out right at 1010. So it's not up in the IPA range. I'd call it more of a pale ale.
Well, that brings up that whole subject of quote session IPA and American Pale, and I don't understand. A small IPA is an American Pale Ale.
Yeah, well, they start getting into the session IPAs, and there's not enough malt to balance out the hops they're putting in those things. And those things just taste like hop water a lot of the time. I really have yet to find one that I can truly say I enjoy.
So that's your definition, is that it's an IPA that's lost its malt?
Yeah, I probably think more of a pale versus IPA in terms of ABV than anything else.
Right.
I want a pale ale to be in the 5 to 6 range. I want an IPA to be in the 7.5 range. But that's usually my first consideration is ABV. So yeah, it's going to have a little bit less malt. It's going to have a little less alcohol than an IPA. But I just think it is a smaller IPA. But in this particular case, I put a lot of hop in it. I don't know if I class it one way or the other. I just brewed a beer.
So I mentioned that this, at least for an APA, the malt bill really has to be very simple. You have to, I call it the malt bill to be sort of a one note kind of thing. Whereas if you have a bunch of different malts in it, it kind of, I guess, overruns the hops.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I didn't brew this beer to be a pale ale. I mean, I just brewed it to be a beer. It just happened what I had to drink tonight.
Oh yeah. Well, I was just talking in pale ale. Has anybody experienced that same sort of thing where the malt bill gets too complex and you can't taste the hops anymore? Of course, that's in a beer style that needs to be hot.
I don't know. To me, I believe there's a lot of room for both. For a complex malt bill and a fairly aggressive hop schedule. I think the two can go together nicely as long as the proportion is right, as long as the balance is still there.
Sounds good. And Andrew, what do you got?
Well, I'm going to get my name written on the board because I don't have the homework for today. I just have a homebrewed American Amber. I figured that was the closest I could get. I don't have any.
So American Amber, of course, is more malty. It's more malt focused. So what did you do for that one?
So let's see. The hops in it are I want to say
I did a blend. I think I did Columbus and Cascade, which is a classic. You know, I like the classic hops. I like non-proprietary hops. And the base beer, although I generally agree with you that I like a very simple grain bill, this one is probably as complex as I get. It's apart from the two-row, it's probably about I think it's 8% Munich, 8% Crystal 40. And then a portion of basically Special B. Actually, it's Special X from Breeze or from Best Malt, and then a pinch of black malt. Yeah, I think if I had to do it over again, I'd probably use a little less. I'd probably simplify it a bit. And I maybe use a touch more roasted malt and diminish the crystal in the Munich. But I like a really clean malt profile though. So, you know, some other people might enjoy the sweetness and the carameliness. But I like it real well. I like ambers. I guess we'll get to ambers later in the year, but
what does describe that Special X or Red X? What would you characterize that as?
It's different from Red X. It's the Special X is very much like Special B.
Okay.
I don't even know if they make it anymore, actually.
Whose malt is it?
It's Best.
Best? Okay.
Yeah, I'm Googling here. It looks like they still have it, but it's basically Special B. It gives you like that raisiny, plummy kind of caramel. Yeah, very, very dark caramel.
That sounds good. Well, Eric, I see you've got something, a homebrewed Centennial Pale.
I do. It's my version of the Two Hearted. Didn't come out as well this year. I don't know. There's some yeast character there that shouldn't be there. It almost tastes like a Belgium IPA. It's actually not bad, but typically when I dry hop, I just throw a bunch of hops in the conical. This time I got tired of when I keg it. It's really hard to get all those hops out, tend to clog my lines. So I threw a bag in there, and I don't think I sanitized the bag thoroughly enough. It's interesting, but I did 92% pale malt. I threw in 4.6% wheat. I did 3.4% caramel 60 and a lot of Centennial hops. I dry hopped with 6 ounces, and this was a 10-gallon batch, and came out pretty good, but it's not as clean as it usually is.
So, are you using one of those? Was it muslin or cotton bags or?
No, I used a nylon. It's usually what I use for my hop spider. And I sanitized it. I should have boiled it. I didn't. And I think that's where I got some of my funk from.
It could be, yeah, because I do like you do use that the nylon grain sacks with the real fine mesh.
Right.
And I put the hops and the grain sack and all in, just recently boiled water. So it's not boiling, but it was. So the hops are not really boiled, but that's how I do the dry hopping. I'm not sure it's the best, but.
Right. Yeah, I'm just going to throw it in. I got a filter now that I can filter out the hop sediment. So live and learn.
I just take those bags. If I use one of those bags, if I think it's dirty at all, I'll throw it in a little paracetic, and then I'll rinse it off and throw it in some star sand and use it from there, not having to boil it or anything else. But if especially if I'm brewing, I probably got that stuff sitting around anyway.
And that's what I did. I soaked it in PBW and then star sand. But
because star sand is pretty flavor neutral.
It is.
I recall.
Don't fear the foam. That was their motto.
And Lee, what do you got?
I get put on the board there as well. On tap, I had a homebrew, so not a big IPA, not a real bitter IPA, but one that I brewed a few times and stuff. So it's about a 6.8% beer or so. So it's just over the top, probably on the specs of pale ale. So got that, and then for the blonde, I have actually a British Golden, which is a smash. That's the English. So that's a smash beer. That's a single malt, single hop of Maris Otter and Mosaic, which I think hits it maybe a little. It's probably a little hoppier, a little more bitter than a pale ale or than a blonde, but it's sort of in that the English version in that same realm.
And what was the yeast you used on the golden?
On the golden, pop that one up here. I believe on the golden, I just used SO5 just to make sure.
I guess that could be another point that I overlooked while I was going through all the parameters. For both the blonde ale and for a typical APA, you're typically looking for very little yeast character. So Chico yeast is one of the populars, but there's a few others that are at least very, very modest, not big ester producers.
Speaking of that, in this beer, I used WLP 90 for the first time, the San Diego super yeast, and I am now a fan. It performs really well.
What kind of flavor profile do you feel that makes?
It's real clean and accentuates the hops. I mean, it's similar in that respect to the Chico yeast, but I like the performance better, and it clears. I think it clears better than the Chico yeast too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Anything clears better than Chico yeast, but I tried that yeast a few years back and did not like it. It was too
you're talking about the super yeast.
The super. I thought there just wasn't any character there, and I thought it was almost like too dry and not anything of interest. I mean. So that's interesting. Where can I get this beer?
Well, Tom, what kind of sulfate level were you dealing with?
I don't know. It was
high, low,
5-6 years ago. I can go back to the archives.
Well, do you figure it was high or low though?
It was probably more balanced back in those days.
Okay. And Andrew, with your use, do you figure you're high or low sulfate?
It would have been high. I can tell you exactly. 270 ppm.
Okay, that's pretty damn high.
Yeah, I like it high for these beers.
Typically have your chloride down the 50 range for a 6-to-1 ratio, or is that not? Is it usually higher as well?
To be honest, I don't pay that much attention to the ratio. My chloride for this batch was a grand total of 4.
4. Wow. So you used RO water to add the, okay.
Yeah.
No calcium chloride. Okay.
But
That's
yeast
an
on that.
interesting take, though. I always like try to do some balance, but I always wonder, like, you know, is there any real benefit to this? And
You get into tail chasing with that, right?
yep. Well, I'm always like, well, water like this would never exist in the real world, so I'm going to add some chloride.
That's possible.
Possible, but find me some, Martin.
Oh, well, yeah, you're right. Andrew Bowling,
Got some in my basement.
what are you enjoying?
Well, I didn't have time to get the beers for today's assignment, but I'll be sure and get the little stout for next time. So,
Oh, that's no big deal. So, what have you been brewing?
I obtained a pressurized fermenter at the end of last year, and so I've been trying to make a repeatable golden lager. Kind of like
By golden lager, so just like Pils malt with some.
Yeah, like 90% Pilsner, like 10% Vienna, like a single dose of like a Hallertau,
That's good stuff.
3470 yeast, under 15 psi, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. The first batch came out really nice, and so I'm trying to repeat it, see if I've, if that was a fluke, if that was luck.
And by pressurized fermenter, what are you talking in what variety?
I've got that Firmzilla plastic pressurized one with the.
Those look awesome. Yeah.
And Andrew, you're running 15 psi. You said.
Yeah.
Wow, that's high.
The whole
got a little spunding valve.
Yeah, okay. Spunding valve, full time, 15 psi, 50 degrees. A lot of people who ferment that high will go at a higher temperature because they're trying to go at a higher temperature. So that seems really cool.
I've got my yeast to use it, Andrew.
That's supposed to suppress esters, right?
Right. I'm using the dry 3470.
Fermentus. Yeah.
Fermentus. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It does well at L temperatures too. So yeah, that's good yeast.
Okay. Yeah. I'll report back on how the second batch comes out.
Good.
I've got the starter going right now, so try to do it this weekend.
Has anybody ever tried? I've read a couple articles where they've done some, split apart a batch and done some fermented under pressure and some normally fermented with just a airlock on it, and then presented those beers to people and asked them what the differences were. And interesting, some of those articles that people have had. What do you guys think, one versus the other?
All I understand is that it's supposed to be less fruity or less estery with the higher pressure. But I've never explored it.
I haven't either. I find it fascinating, and if you've got one of those fermenters, that's awesome to be able to do that, and effortlessly, really.
Well, I stole Tom's method, and I'm doing pressure fermentation as well, but doing it in a keg, and it works really well. I set it up ahead of time, and so it's flushing the keg out with the spunding valve, and then I hook that keg over to my serving keg, and then I've been able to take that, and it auto pushes into the serving keg, which has been flushed out with its own CO2. So it never sees outside CO2 until it goes into the keezer. So
yeah, I think a couple of us are doing that. Andrew's certainly doing it. I'm doing it. So I ferment under, Andrew, I'm not going like you, but I think a lot of us are doing it to spund, but not necessarily under pressure the whole time. So I'll go like 3 psi generally throughout the bulk of the fermentation, and then crank it up to the end so that I'm 15, 20 by the time fermentation is done. Probably more like 12, 15 on lagers, but on ales, I'll try to go a bit higher so I don't have to carbonate at all.
And Lee, how high a pressure are you spunding?
Mine's been running 10 since the beginning. So I built up to 10 straight across from the primary keg through the serving keg. So I haven't quite gotten it down gravity-wise. I'm sitting at 19 now. I'd like to get it down a few more points, but it's
yeah, and that's always my fear is I'm gonna get like they're gonna stall out, or I'm gonna get a talysis sooner or something like that. And that's, I don't know. I like being at the like 3 psi because it makes it really easy to take a sample from a closed system. There's always something hooked up, so either Cobra tap or sampling valve. I'm using a conical or whatever, but there's always like you can always take beer out without getting any oxygen in, and then try to time cranking it up right, which I've gotten lazy and haven't been using my tilt hydrometers, but those are a pretty slick way to do it. But you gotta get them.
I've got
they're not perfect.
Yeah, I've got a 6-inch picnic tap on my primary, so I can easily pull a sample with it.
Yeah, it gets a little tricky. 10 psi with a 6-inch piece of hose, though.
It wait a little while for it to calm down. It's a glass of foam, but it settles down, and it's.
Well, I can manage a whopping, I don't know, 3 or 4, maybe 6 inches of water column. But that's all I can do with my old style Blickman conical.
So there's some good like spunning valves back in the day were really hard to figure out. Because you had to, get some, I don't know, they were expensive and not very good. I think Andrew and I are both using like Norgine. I think they're like pressure regulators, but you can basically use them as they're pressure regulators. Yeah. So they work for the purpose. But these things were, commercially $150, but there was like an eBay seller who was selling for like $15 a few years back. And so we got those, but now there's some, I know, was it Kegland, and there's a few others. And Andrew, I don't know what you're using, but even Blickman makes a spunning valve nowadays. SS Brewtech,
one,
the fancy one. Yeah.
That's one.
That's a Kegland.
Kegland. Yeah. It worked great. And you can swap out the regulator in it. What I had in is the 15 psi. If I can't go above 15 with what I've got, I have to put swap out the regulator in there if I wanted to do that.
Is there?
But it's really simple.
Suggest that you want to go above 15 psi?
No, only listening to Tom say he goes up to 20.
Okay.
Well,
I haven't.
So, I'm just thinking, I rarely actually get up to 20, but like if you look at an ale, if you're fermenting an ale, let's say, it's finishing at 65, 67 degrees, to be fully carbonated, you got to be pretty high up there in pressure. With lagers, it's a bit easier to get them fully carbonated at 50 degrees. You don't need nearly as much pressure. But Andrew, you're studying something.
So this was the cheapest change to my process I've ever done. It cost about $20 for this thing, and I already had the kegs. So
that's the same one I got.
You've got this one?
Yeah, it worked great.
Yeah, it works great. Costs about $20 or so, and just put it on the kegs you already have. So,
hey Martin, I think Blickman's working on a pressurized cap for your if you have like the 10-gallon or 5-gallon fermenter conical.
I've got a 12-gallon, with the flat steel plate.
Okay.
So unless it's got some sort of clamping things,
I think it's a clamp, that goes around the top.
Yeah. That's cool because he makes a spunning valve that goes like he gave me one with one of the cornicals, that screws on. I already had 4 other ones, so I don't use it a ton, but it he does make one. But it sounds like the clamp would allow you to hold pressure better in some of these or the original series conicals.
Yeah, they have a pro brewer, Josh Miller, who used to be, I think, at the one down in Crawfordsville. He's our pro brewer guy. Yeah, and so he actually had some malt from Sugar Creek he gave us locally for a brew we're going to do. So when I was over there, they were talking about that a little bit. So it was interesting.
Don, you guys get hooked up with all the best stuff up there in Lafayette. You need to, you know.
I am happy to share, Mr. Tom. I'll give you honey, whatever you need, buddy.
I've not used
Joe,
my
what are you finishing off there?
honey yet, but I was looking at it today.
I tell you, the guys in CCZ have made a bunch of stuff with it and made bot kits and so forth, and they're loving it. Especially Jeremiah Tyson and Nick Boland, who both do well in the meads and the Indy Cup. So
yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it like, you know, there's no like, this isn't biotech honey, or, you know, this isn't genetically engineered bees. These are normal bees, I think.
Yeah, they're doing research for the bees. So anyways, sorry, Martin, we're talking about. You go ahead, Martin. You lead.
No problem. Joe, what do you just finish off there? I know you've been brewing.
Well, I brewed Andy's Hellesbach on the 29th of December, and kegged it last Tuesday or Wednesday. I don't remember exactly what day, and I thought, well, I'll try some of that this evening. I went out, and evidently my regulator's not working right, so we had to start the carbonation all over again. But anyway, as a flat beer, it tasted pretty damn good. That's the one that I won the first place last year in the Braumeister with a decoction mash, double decoction. This one I did without the decoction. We'll see how it comes out. But the other thing that happens here is this is completely, although it looks the same as the old system, it is completely new from what I brewed at Hellesbach a year, 2 months ago. So I'm learning, and we'll see what happens. But I also brewed an alt beer, and 2 days ago I checked it and it was done, and so I set it up on the sink and got myself a sample in the hydrometer, and as I was getting the sample, I said, boy, that don't smell good. And as I filled the hydrometer, I was down at 10.9, which is what I was basically shooting for. But it smelled like cooked cabbage that had been sitting in the sun for about 2 weeks. So I opened a spigot and let it run right on down the drain and join the rest of the garbage. Other than that, I brewed a Schwartz beer, and I got a Doppelbock in the fermenter, and so that's where I'm at. I'm going to try to rebrew the alt beer this weekend. Got the yeast for it today, but I'm drinking I don't know if you've seen it when I brought it in here a while ago. This is a Ballast Point Bonito. It's a blonde ale, and this is something I bought about 2 years ago or 3 years ago when I was working with the IBU on style comparison, very similar to what we're doing tonight, a pale ale and a blonde ale. And the other beer I have is this one is another Bondito, or another Ballast Point Grunion. So anyway, we'll see. I haven't opened it, but the Blondeo is, of course, is way over the hill.
3-year-old blonde is pretty good.
So Joe, with regard to that Hellesbach, what yeast? You're on mute still, Joe. What yeast did you use?
The alt beer?
No, the Hellesbach.
Well, not real sure what I used with it right now. I'd have to dig out the recipe, but I believe it was a Southern Bavarian type yeast.
Well, at least you called me and I mentioned the S189. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that one was I was working on a recipe for a well, I keep coming up with rye beer, and you come up with an S29, and I haven't brewed it. I don't need to brew it because I don't think that particular style is up in the Braumeister until, yeah, let's see. Brungarden beer. It's not up until August, so I don't need to brew it now yet.
Sounds like you've been brewing a lot of beers for the Braumeister. Joe, you can defend your title.
I hoping to have 10 beers ready to go if I can get the oat beer going. I got a very nice black beer.
Nice.
That, I'm going to keg tomorrow and see what happens with it. But I really like the taste and the flavor and the aroma of it when I checked the hydrometer to see where it was at. And it was at 10-11, so I'm happy with it.
Well, to give you a little intel, Brady's out this year, but I do know both Nick Boland and Jeremiah Tyson from CCZ got a lot of his recipes and looking to enter. So
Wait, why is Brady out?
Brady's moving to Florida.
Really? Well,
yeah.
Where in Florida?
I think it's the Tampa Bay area.
Hmm.
He loves my favorite quarterback, so he's going down there. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, he's not going to be there.
Yeah, he'll be gone.
Go Kansas City.
The old goat.
Boo.
Who else did you say was not going to be in the Braumeister this year?
I think just Brady's not going to be in. And the last round last year, he had already moved out of his house to an apartment. So I think that affected his last round, why he didn't do well against Ryan. So,
well, good luck to Brady.
What about up north that won it last year?
Ryan Turner is the one.
Valpo or wherever.
I think he's in Terre Haute, but maybe I'm mistaken. I don't know.
No. The guy, somebody up in Valpo, I thought.
Ryan Turner's up in Valpo.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't know where he lives. It's Ryan Turner, wherever he lives.
Damn good,
But I tell you, we have a lot of great brewers on this call who could join and win, like Tom and like Andrew and Lee.
I think we need to have an FBI session on what I think is the biggest issue facing home brewers, and that's there's only so much beer you can drink, and you can't have anybody over with COVID, and so my brewing's down, but I can't. There's no reason I can't drink it all. I'm less motivated to brew as a result.
I'm dropping beer on people's porches.
Just give more away, buddy. That's all I gotta do.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I could start doing that. I could drop beer off on people's porches. They can tell me what they think of it.
Hey, John,
actually,
what are you doing, John?
I was thinking about as soon as the weather turns nice is, like just setting up on the end of the driveway and, sending out an email to the neighbors, like swing by for a beer or lemonade or, whatever. I have a couple options.
You go look at our map, our neighborhood on the map. There's a fellow down the road who's got Mike's Bar on Google, and I've got Lee's Home Brewery on the Google map. So we've got a 2 establishment neighborhood going here. The neighborhood's just getting started.
John, what are you brewing?
I haven't been brewing anything between the holidays. Out of town most of January. I got a bunch of dark beer on tap, so I'm drinking a Union Jack. So nothing special.
What a Union Jack? Isn't that like a Firestone Walker thing or something?
Yeah.
Like that? Oh, okay.
Just a sweet IPA.
Sounds good. And Jake, what have you been doing? You're still on mute, Jake. There you go.
Yeah, I've been drinking IPAs. I'm bad about buying the right beer.
But you're good about drinking what you like.
I'm good about drinking whatever's in the fridge.
That's what matters. So, and while we're at it, Tom, what have you been brewing?
Me?
At all?
I brewed a couple beers. I have to think of what they are. I brewed a Dunkel that I sort of almost left in a fermenter too long because I honestly forgot about it. And but my wife is sucking it up tonight, revving pork chops, and it's perfect pork chop beer.
That it would be.
And then I also brewed a wee heavy, strong Scottish type beer that is not in my normal wheelhouse, but I'm pretty happy with. Come on, nice.
And for that wee heavy, did you do any of the invert stuff?
I will have to check. It's been like 3 months now, so it's not super recent, but I have been doing some sugar in several beers here recently. Oh, a dark mild is the other thing I've got going on that I think I was inspired by Andrew's 3%. What was that, Andrew? Sort of 3% bitter, ordinary bitter, but lower. Essentially, that you brewed. I think I had at some point this fall.
Are you talking about the pale mild?
Pale mild, yes.
Yeah, with invert sugar.
Yes. And so anyway, I got inspired doing some more British beers, so I did a darker mild, trying to get some color with low oxygen brewing, and was reasonably successful in getting some color.
Well, and one of the things that I've at least sort of deduced, brewing low oxygen with some of these other styles, it really changes the character. So did you still think that beer came out well with the low ox?
I think this mild did, but I've also made a lot of bad beers as a result. I mean, you basically have to take 20 years of recipe development and throw a good chunk of it out the window.
Yeah, that's my agree, or I agree, whatever.
But the beers stay better longer, and the pale ones are better from the start. So yeah, I don't know, a new challenge. So yeah, I did, and I also have adopted. Andrew needs to give a now that you're doing the technical, and Andrew you need to give a sourgoot talk. Probably needs to be number one on the list, but I've upped my sourgoot game thanks to Andrew.
Actually, I want you to give a talk, Tom.
Yeah, I'm totally doing that, but it can't be sourgoot, but.
And I don't think you were on the call, but we've got John Allison lined up for March 10th talking about his cool ship.
Cool.
Ship.
And I've got a question about sourgoot production. Can you, my understanding is it has to be literally a continual process. You can't stop. Is that true?
You can stop.
But will it restart though?
Yeah, there's different ways. Like I will tell you Tom's opinion, and then Andrew can tell you the real answer. But my advice, my very short advice on sourgoot is, like, you really need to not hop your wort. So don't, like, I messed up sourgoot. I've failed sourgoot attempts several times by thinking, well, this wort isn't very hopped, it'll work. And like, depending on, like, especially if you're using just throwing in some raw grain, that's like, those hops really do inhibit lacto. Like, that's really a thing. And the second thing is having the right temperature makes a heck of a difference. So if you can get in the 110, 115 window, I will say, that's really where you want to be. I mean, bacteria will just go crazy at that level, and it's hot enough where it's inhibiting yeast. And so you're not getting the wild yeast. If you're just throwing an ounce of grain in your sourgoot to get it started, like, that temperature is really where you want to be. No hops, 115-ish degrees, and you'll have awesome sourgoot in, 24 or 48 hours. Like, and if you keep it going longer, as I've sort of found recently, it'll get really, like, the titratable acidity will really go up quite a bit, and more than I would have expected, actually. So it could be pretty potent. It was almost too potent for me on that dunkel. But yeah, that's the thing. And then Andrew's got me freezing. So we're both making a batch of beer, putting it in Mylar bags and freezing the wort. So when you want sourgout, you basically just pull a bag out of the freezer and just go to get one, thaw it, put an ounce of grain in it, keep it at 115, and you've got sourgout. It's basically like making a starter. There you go.
Well, but so what? This is all new to me.
This is
Whole Foods.
This is Andrew Tech here, man.
So wait, so that Mylar bag, that's just uninoculated wort or what?
Frozen, inoculated.
Yeah.
This time what I did was I did lower the pH of the wort before freezing it to 4.3, I think it was. But the last time I did it, I did not do that. And I guess the advantage to not doing it is you could then use it for starter wort. Well, you could probably use it for starter wort either way, I guess. I don't think 4.3 pH wort would be bad for a starter.
No, the yeast don't really get inhibited until you're like well under 4.
Yeah, so I've used mine for starters. So I made the wort, boiled it, and then basically hot packed it in those Mylar bags. So I ran it. I didn't run it in right after boiling. I probably let it come down to 160 or something. Still well in pasteurization temp range. Ran it in the bags, let them come down to room temp for overnight, and then started putting in the fridge and freezer and whatever. There were several bags. So I was I didn't want to overload. So but that seems like it's pretty nice as long as you've got a nice, I'm not sure what I'll do with the bags after they've been used once, especially if I've used a bag for sourgout. I know Andrew's using the bags, but I think I may be a little leery of using that same bag for a yeast starter the next time, even though if you're hot packing them, it should be fine. So it's probably not a concern really.
And you're just adding that, say, ounce of grain directly into that thawed thing pack.
Yeah, and ideally raised up to above 100 and moving towards 115.
Ah, okay.
Because otherwise you'll get wild yeast and stuff off that grain. Probably not a ton. I mean, bacteria multiply way exponentially faster than yeast.
Yep.
But depends on, I guess, how clean of a sourgout you want. But and Andrew, you should probably talk here, but bacteria, that 115, I think you go 117.276 or something degrees. You're very precise.
I think it's 118.4 for 12 hours, just to kill off the baddies, and then I bring it down to where the lactose is a little happier.
How are you managing the temperature?
Well, so I use a sous vide cooker, and I use a Cambro. Let me see if I can find a photo here. But
while he's doing that, I've got a wine fridge that I put a heating element in, like a firm wrap kind of element, and a controller, so I can raise. I was having a little trouble getting above 100 degrees, but I've made some modifications, so now I can get above 100. But I use this, having a wine fridge that can cool, and I mostly use it for heating, for making bread and stuff. Throw your sourdough in at whatever temperature you want is extremely handy thing to have as a home brewer. I'm going on the bandwagon of everybody needs that heatable chamber because it's very useful. Carbonate your beer a little faster, put it 70, 80 degrees, let it carbonate, whatever. Okay, I'm done. Soapbox mode off.
I have one thing before we carry on. We have a winner for tonight's drawing. It's Andrew Cordy.
Hey, what'd I win?
That sucks.
How did I even enter? I didn't, just by being here?
By being here.
Oh, sweet.
You get a gift card from Primeval, is that correct?
Or something like that.
That's fantastic.
That is correct. $15.
Yeah. By the way, that coffee stout and their regular stout, the oatmeal stout, I think it is. Yep, they're damn good.
I have not been up to have the coffee stout, so this
Well,
will allow that to happen.
It will undoubtedly be gone probably in the next couple of days.
Oh,
So
I might
you're
miss out.
probably shit out of luck. Like I said, only 2 barrels made, and I was there on a Saturday after the Tuesday when they tapped it, so they'd already gone through half of it in 4 or 5 days.
Hey, this is my opportunity to put in a plug to try to get more free beer. But I've given the Primeval guys some, like I bought a whiskey barrel, a bourbon barrel this fall, took it apart. And so I've got staves, a lot of staves. And so they've done a couple beers using staves I gave them. But if any FBIers want a half stave, which fits nicely in a Corning keg, if you're into sanitizing, put in your oven for a while to like pasteurize it and then put that sucker in your keg, you're getting, 1/2 of the stave is charred and bourbon soaked, and the other half is pure, Corson, oak, whatever. But if anybody wants one, I'm happy to give you one. You just got to come by and get it. And then the key is I need 2 beers at the end, 2 bottles of beer. That's the price.
To taste what the product was?
Yes, I want to see what you did with it.
How long are you usually letting that sit there?
Tim would be a better person to answer. I think he was doing like just a couple weeks. He's reused them a time or two. Because I don't know. I've never made it up for his beers, so I haven't gotten to.
Didn't he also do some bourbon smoke or something like that for these staves?
I don't think he did, at least not in the first batch. I think he used it on their stout or their bock or something, and he just put it in. I think they've got some of these kegs that have like a 4-inch triclover opening, so they can put stuff in, and so they just put a half stave in a quarter barrel, I think, or half barrel, and he said it got to be in a good.
I've got some oak staves and some chips that I just keep in bourbon. And it rather than put them in the oven, I take them right out of the bourbon and throw them right into the keg.
And Charlie, that's at home?
Yes, I know, and absolutely, and it's funny as hell the law regarding what we can do at the pub. We can take a used bourbon barrel, and we can put our beer in it to age, and we don't have to do anything with that barrel. And we get barrels. The last George Jekyll barrel that we got. Oh, we got that one Heaven Hill that was that 10-year Heaven Hill barrel we had. And there was a whole bunch of bourbon in that barrel. And the law did not require us to dump that bourbon out or anything else. I mean, it does not say a damn thing about residual bourbon in that barrel.
Interesting.
That seems like an interesting loophole. Like you could get a full bourbon barrel and add 1% beer, and you would have some beverage that would be taxed differently than some other beverage. I don't know.
I would say the reasonable man clause might come in somewhere there, but
nobody's reasonable.
Regardless, I mean, seriously, guys, it might be a loophole, but the result is we get some amazing beers out of these things. I mean, my God, yeah, there's a pretty full bourbon flavor in the beer, but that marriage between a real good a good sized stout and bourbon is phenomenal, and the wood, it's phenomenal.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I like the idea of putting the wood in the beer instead of the beer in the wood. from a oxygenation and oxidation standpoint. It just seems, yeah, there's different surface areas, et cetera, but
I agree with what you're saying, but I would say that the beers, when you're putting beers in there, that the alcohol is that high.
high alcohol. Yeah, I agree, Charlie. Hey, Ron Smith.
Ron's on.
Better late than never.
So, Ron, did you go to that whatever Belgian thing?
What Belgian thing?
Wasn't there some sort of Belgian thing right just at the same time?
Yeah, I think there may have been. I think I expressed interest in it, but I've been busy with other stuff.
Oh, man.
So no, didn't. You guys already finished chatting?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we're talking
we're chatting
all over the world.
Did you the two things I was hoping to discuss, wondering if you talked about them already? One, biotransformation.
Ooh, no.
Second, hop creep.
No.
Did you discuss either of those things?
Not at all. No.
In talking about dry hopped, hoppy beers, those are two timely topics that I don't know much about. I know the basics. So I was kind of wondering if others knew more about them, had kind of experimented with anything, etc.
I have.
Of course you have, Andrew.
Well, I'm probably not the most expert in it because I don't brew a lot of hoppy beers, but I've definitely added hops like right after High Kreuzen.
Uh-huh.
You definitely get a different character. You get the biotransformation.
Well, and talk about that biotransformation. What is the change in character, though?
Yeast. The biotransformation is yeast. When the yeast is active, like during High Kreuzen, the yeast converts hop compounds into new compounds.
Yeah, but the effective layman's result.
New flavors and aromas are created that you would not get if you added those hops late after primary fermentation.
And in a better way, because I have to admit, I always add my hops, like there's hardly any fermentation left.
It's better if you want a New England IPA.
To do it way earlier, like Andrew?
You want the biotransformation if you're making a New England IPA, okay. or if you want a real tropical, juicy kind of character.
Well,
if you want like a West Coast character, then you want to wait until the yeast are out of the way, and you don't want biotransformation.
So that's kind of my question: is you create new flavor and aroma compounds, but what do those flavor and aroma compounds tend to lean towards? Do they lean towards tropical fruit always?
Peachy, yeah, they lean toward fruitier, peachy, papaya, mango.
In this,
and they're quite strong.
I don't know if we know I don't know the chemistry, but I don't know if it's like covering up the citrusy, whatever, and just making those shine more, or if you're actually making more of them, or what. I don't know if anybody knows, but I don't know.
You're opening up a huge world of variables, though, and what happened, what yeast. I mean, my God, that's a bunch of variables.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, the big trade-off from a practical standpoint, from a homebrewing standpoint and technique, is like you want to add hops while there's active fermentation, but yeast will grab a hold of a whole lot of those hop oils, and so when the yeast flocculate, you're losing a ton of oil, right? So this is the the constraint and the dilemma is while you're biotransforming, you're going to lose more of what you put in there hop wise because the yeast are going to suck it out. So
Yeah.
I mean,
plus what you lose to the off gassing as well. So you're losing aroma too.
Yeah, right. So when I'm trying to do it, I'm usually not as attentive to my yeast and beer as I need to be, but I'm usually trying to do it not right after high corrosion like Andrew, but I'm trying to do it like while its fermentation's going but slowing down, and maybe even the fact where I've like crashed a 67, not crashed, but taken a 67 fermenting beer and like knocked it down to 60, so that fermentation is still going on. There's still sugars that it's sucking up, but that bit of a drop in temperature has knocked out some of the yeast. If I'm using my cornicle, I can even pull some of that yeast off, put the hops in. There's still fermentation going on, so hopefully you're getting biotransformation. And if you used a technique to add your hops where you might have introduced some oxygen, there's still yeast they'll scrub that up immediately. And then you're not leaving them in there super long either and getting too grassy, especially if you're going New England. You don't want too grassy either. So all this is more like what I attempt to do, but I usually am not. I usually mess it up somewhere. So, and this is coming from a guy who brewed for 20 years before he brewed an IPA. So you can buy IPAs. Key fact: you can buy IPAs at a store.
Oh,
they have them.
True fact.
That's what I've heard.
Or local brewery.
And the hop creep thing is a huge issue that I regularly taste in commercial beers, and I've had happen in my beers, and so I take steps to avoid it. IPAs that get they end up with diacetyl acetaldehyde because the enzymes in the hops cause the beer to convert starch, like residual starches in the beer to convert further, and then
or unfermentable sugars,
dextrins or whatever,
will get converted into fermentables. So then you get a little bit more fermentation that happens. But
not, and if it doesn't happen well, like if it happens only partially, then you end up with the byproducts.
Yeah,
the diacetyl, the acetaldehyde, and they don't get cleaned up. That's what you get a commercial IPA that just tastes like. Why is it so like kind of?
But is the degree of fermentation enough to create that kind of noticeable character?
I think you can go down a couple points in gravity. Like I think I've heard and seen that.
Like tenths, or you're talking tenths.
Like 1.011 to 1.009.
There are papers on it.
Key points.
Yeah.
And so my approach is, my approach for the past 5 years, probably, I'm not saying I've been successful, but is to just make the most fermentable wort possible pretty much all the time. And so for starters, there's not much more that the hops, there's nothing there for the hops to convert, for the hop enzymes to convert. That's number one. Number two is either try to make sure the yeast is out of the way by the time you dry hop, which is antithetical to doing biotransformation.
Right.
So, So if you want biotransformation, you're out of luck there.
Yeah.
Or if you want that, just make sure that you allow the extra fermentation to finish. So like add the dry hops, let the enzymes do their thing, let the yeast do its thing, keep it at a temperature where that will happen before you cold craft it.
And hence that's why you're adding after high corrosion, because you want the yeast to be plenty active to clean. Like
yes.
You want it all in one shot.
Dormant, if they're going to be active for creating the hop creep, you want it to finish. It's kind of like when the dog starts humping your leg. It's best just to let it finish.
So hop creep is an issue with
Cousin Eddie from National American.
It's an issue with commercial brewers.
Line in all of Hollywood.
It's an issue with commercial brewers who are trying to, package the freshest dry hopped beer they can. So, you don't wait long enough for that second little bit of fermentation to take place, and that whole process to do its thing, and you package, and then it's going to happen in the container. I don't think it's enough to create an explosive situation.
But we've all had this beer. We've all ordered and had this beer, and we're like, why? You taste it, and you may not identify it as diacetyl right away, but it's just got this heaviness, and it might be like a sweetness, and you're just thinking, this is not right, or this isn't like the last time I had this beer when it was real clean and bitter and dry. I think it's a widespread problem.
Say that again. It's a what?
I think it's a
widespread problem.
Both commercially and.
Well, hell, I don't. I think both of these things are things a lot of brewers don't even really know about yet. I mean, it's out there in the white papers and things, but it's not super. I mean, it's not something everybody knows.
Well, I think hop creep was only even discovered in 2018.
Yeah.
I think that's when the first paper was the first study was done where somebody figured out what was going on. There's enzymes in the hops that are
right. Yeah, it's been no more than a year and a half or so. And biotransformation, while an older topic, I don't think it's been discussed much longer than that either. Has it? Year and a half, 2 years? Maybe.
I'm not that into New England IPAs, so that that crowd may have been all about it for longer. I feel like I've learned about it. I've come into it kind of late, but yeah,
Ron,
it seems decent to me.
I had a third topic, maybe in the same category, and that's oxidation. And from the standpoint of, I think if I had a microbrewery and I was sort of doing the more or less Lodo process that I do now, and I had some nice serving tanks that are, really labor efficient and awesome, bright tanks or serving tanks you serve out of, I would not use them for my IPA. I would keg off the IPA, just because you're not exposing your whole beer to CO2, to external CO2. You're only doing it a keg at a time. That's probably going to keep the other kegs fresher than if you had it all in a serving tank. Following me? That's probably not the best way to say it. I think Andrew's nodding. Like if you have 10 barrels of beer, you're going to be oxidizing that whole 10 barrels of beer. Like, I know Andrew and I are very sensitive about how much, you don't want to expose your beer to a bottle of CO2 before you have to, because we go to all this trouble to not have that 0.0001% oxygen that's in your CO2. So only expose a keg at a time. Don't expose your 10 barrel bright, serving tank to it.
Oh.
CO2 is not pure, is what Tom's getting at.
CO2 is not pure. And for your hoppy beers, for your Helles, your IPAs, or the Lodo, I think really pays off. That's a strategy that I don't think everybody is employing, that maybe they want to think about.
Another way that the commercial breweries are avoiding hop creep is by limiting the dry hop time to 24 hours or less, because studies have shown that you get maximum dry hop extraction within 12 hours Even though people love to do their 3-day, 5-day, 7-day dry hops, study shows that at the commercial level, you don't need any more than 24 hours.
So the only argument I've heard on that is if you want grassy, you might want them in longer.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
people diss grassy, but I think a nice dank grassiness can be a nice complement to some.
I like dank. I don't like grassy.
But I think the short exposure is going to give you the key characteristics of that hop. So in large, dry hop, large quantities, you're going to get the main points, the main flavor and aroma points of that hop. But there is something to be said for leaving them in longer and picking up those more herbal, plant-like, earthy, grassy tones that some people like.
Yeah.
That's a choice.
Likes I think he recommended no more than 3 days, period. But that was at least a decade ago.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that it's even shorter now.
Yeah, there's been a lot of more beer loving university students who've gone through systems and like, I'm going to test whatever, Oregon, Washington, stuff like that. There's been a lot of studies. But Andrew, that's the first time I've heard that short exposure to hops could limit the what do you call it? The drop in.
Well, just because it limits the amount of time that the enzymes are.
But you would think the enzymes would be soluble, and you remove the hop matter, you're still going to have enzymes in there. Is where my brain.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll see if I can find the study, but the other thing to remember is it's at the commercial scale. So I don't know if that time frame holds for our scale.
I think I don't know why it wouldn't, and I would say it might even apply even more.
Well, because of pressure. I just wonder if at the commercial scale, if the pressure, maybe they get extraction faster, and maybe we don't get enough extraction after 24 hours. That's the way I've done it, and I feel like I do get appropriate amount. But again, I'm not a big IPA pale ale brewer. I'm not competing with these beers or anything. I don't expect them to be to that level. So I have lower standards is what I'm saying.
All those milkshake IPAs are taking up all your time.
Right. So I think we need Eric and company to try this out.
Experiment. Sounds good.
There's also I can't think of the name, but there's a component in the leaves of the hops. If you have more of the vegetal plant, leafy part of the hops in there, the more of that you have in your beer, there is an oxidation component that the more of that's in your beer, the more readily the beer's going to oxidize too. We learned so much about hops over the last decade.
I've got a question about a couple topics we talked about. How do you guys add dry hops when it's Monday?
Yeah, so I've gone. I usually am mostly low tech about it. So that's one of the reasons why I try to add them for the biotransformation, but also while the beer is fermenting to scrub any oxygen I might introduce. So it's pretty, when the beer is only under 3 psi. So this is like, a lot of my beers are 3 psi while they're fermenting, just so I can pull samples and whatever. But you're not going to get, or I haven't witnessed any like big, massive explosions like you see in the videos and stuff of somebody and beers and they're like spraying everywhere. Those are awesome videos. So I have not experienced that. Now, given that, I've also gone to, there's several people out there and several apparatuses where you can, especially if you got like a triclover port and a valve on your fermenter, you can, put your hops in a container or a sight glass or whatever, purge them, hook them up to this thing. You can even, if your fermentation tank is under a little bit of pressure, is purge them even more. and then open that valve, they fall in, and it's, essentially as oxygen free as you can get, and you've actually sparged your hops with CO2 to, get oxygen out. Probably more important if you're using leaf or something like that. I've not gone to that. I'm interested in that, but I'm actually, what I probably would do first is a more low-tech method that I know several people are doing, and that's like you use magnets, and let's say rare earth magnets, to like hold a hop charge at the top of your fermenter. And then when it's time to dry hop, the hop's already in there. You just pull the magnets, and the thing swings down, or the bag drops in. I mean, you could do it as simple as a bag of pellets with a piece of metal, or piece of, it would have to be a magnetic stainless you'd probably want, and then a magnet on the outside that's holding up to the top, and then pull the magnet, and the bag would drop in.
It's freaking awesome.
I've always wanted to try that.
What I did
James Bond. That's like a James Bond brewing thing.
Ocean's 11 of brewing.
Yeah.
on my British Golden, where I did that with the pressurized in the keg, I had my primary keg, and then I chained onto that my dry hop keg, and then I had my serving keg as the third keg. So I just chained them together with the spunding valve on the serving keg. So when I put the dry hop keg on, which I didn't put it on instantly, but a day or two into the fermentation, I went ahead and set up my dry hop keg. And so it's purging that keg with CO2 running across those hops that are in there for, however long it is until I transfer the beer over on top of the dry hop. And I had my dry hops in a stainless perforated cylinders to try and keep it from getting too much hop crap in there. Because the first time I did it with a bag, and the bag let all the hop matter out and it clogged everything. But and then when that's done, when I'm ready to finish the dry hop, then I just simply transfer from that keg over into the serving keg. All have been purged, so it's never seen oxygen since the day I closed the primary keg with the yeast. And I think the dry hop pellets got pretty well, and they've been sitting in a CO2 environment for several days before they ever got exposed to the beer.
This sounds much better than the idea I had when we were at your house, Lee, of like just filling your whole brewery with nitrogen, and you could wear a gas mask when you're in there. It sounds a little bit better. But I'm curious. I wonder if you like pulled the pressure relief valve on the third keg, so the serving keg, if you would get any hop aroma coming over like that.
Well, when I'm doing it, I'm getting a lot of hop aroma. I mean, I believe it's capturing, it's keeping the aroma from getting out. It's not being blended with anything. But when I'm doing an IPA in that fermenter, in the fermentation chamber there, it starts to smell wonderful in there because and that's coming out of the third keg at that point. I've got the three kegs all chained together until I move it from the primary to the dry hop.
That's kind of how I do it, except I don't chain the kegs, but I do use a keg in primary, and I do two stages. I add dry hops to the fermenter keg about 24 hours before I expect to transfer for spund. So, and I do that transfer at like, I don't know, eight points above the expected final gravity. And I do that, but I use a bag and I dangle it. I attach an Oedeker clamp to the bottom of the PRV of the lid with like fishing line or floss or whatever.
Mint floss.
Yeah. And that helps me avoid the clogs. Like, even though the bag does let out a lot of hop matter, but I do also have the dip tube like bent so that I'm not picking up the yeast and stuff at the bottom, so that might help too. But I have found that like dangling the bag.
Are you talking like teabagging? Is it a what kind? Explain your dangle.
Forgive the double entendre, but I find that helps avoid, like, somehow with the bag being right next to the dip tube, that causes clog.
That's what the first one I did. I just had the bag in there, and the suction of it just pulled all the stuff and clogged my dip tube. So I had to pull that one apart and back up a step. But then I went to the stainless steel tube, and I got really very little matter across anywhere, and it goes through. And meanwhile, the yeast that's in the primary, it's got 2 stages there before it ever gets to the serving keg. So it's pretty clean beer by the time it gets over to the serving keg.
Yeah, I have in the next keg, I have like hops waiting there that have been purged, like sparged with CO2, like Tom was talking about, and transfer to that. And then I leave it in there for 24 hours, and then I go to the third keg. And the idea is like 24 hours later, spunding isn't done yet, which is great because the spunding is like the anti-oxidation. So as long as the yeast are active, I've got that protection. So I don't mind doing the transfers. I don't mind doing the introduction of hops and things that are going to introduce oxygen, because the spunding is hopefully scrubbing that all away.
Yeah, so in my setup, my beer has not seen oxygen since the day I closed the primary until it goes into the glass. I mean, it'll see, and it's pretty well carbonated, so it's not even going to take up much of the CO2 that I put on it for pushing. Even that's not going to absorb too much into the beer because it's already carbonated by the time it gets there.
That's the great thing about fermenting in kegs or in a pressure capable vessel.
It was really easy to set up.
Are you a new member?
Which one?
You. Have we met?
Well.
Oh, Ron hasn't seen him with the beard?
He has.
It just keeps growing. It just.
I can't figure out what to do with it.
Yeah.
I know how to cut it off, but I don't know how to do anything in between.
I think you're getting kind of red there, Lee. Santa Claus.
I got some dog clippers.
When I started it, I said, okay, how are you going to measure how long this quarantine stuff goes on?
I mean,
the best way to do that's with your beard. And so I said, I'll cut this off. So I started having meetings.
The less recognizable Lee is, the longer the pandemic has gone on.
That's true. Right.
By the way, is it illegal to drink whiskey in a beer session?
No.
I needed a little whiskey. So
if so, then arrest me now.
I can't think of 2 beverages that go better together.
Has anybody else had this before? Actually, pretty nice, I think. I'm not a
pumpkin.
A Southern Tier makes a pumpkin bourbon.
Oh well, how is pumpkin beer that is distilled or what?
Reading it didn't sound like it was necessarily that, but it's got a little bit of a pumpkin. You taste sort of pumpkin in it. It's a very smooth stuff, but I just thought it was interesting. Southern Tier. My daughter and son-in-law live in Pittsburgh, where Southern Tier has their other facilities. So,
Lee, do you figure it's just the pumpkin pie spices? Maybe.
There's pumpkin. Yeah, I mean it's but thought it was it's kind of interesting. I don't know. I've seen it around here. They gave it to me.
And do they call it what do they call it on there?
A whiskey, pumpkin whiskey.
Pumpkin whiskey. That's interesting. I'm not sure how that's legal in my understanding of the terminology.
But whiskey's not as restricted, I guess, right?
No, it's not.
They don't call it bourbon.
No, they don't call it bourbon.
And it's probably somewhere on there. It'll say whiskey with spices or something.
Yeah, so
Isn't it like
it says pumpkin
flavored whiskey, isn't it? How it's categorized?
Finished.
Yeah. It says pumpkin whiskey, a spirited version of its namesake and a high proof addition to the royal family with notes of pumpkin pie spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, and even a hint of whipped cream and crust. Pumpkin whiskey is says it's just a treat among tricks. So,
Hey, if you can do peanut butter whiskey, you can do pumpkin whiskey.
I think this sounds better.
Hey, so quick, back to beer really briefly. This is it's probably an IPA, but it's probably a sub 6% IPA, but IPA by balance. But I used some of the, for the first time, the Nuevo Mexicanos hops in here. So this is the basically third family, as I understand it, of the whatever hop families. You got marijuana, you got hops, and you got the Nuevo Mexicanos hops. And these were, I don't know, Andrew, you are good at memory, but the Nuevo Mexicanos hops, the variety names.
Wait, you're saying if it's a different family that it's not actually hops?
No, it's like a different, like all the commercial hops we use are like in one family, whatever my botanical nomenclature is not good. These are separate.
So these are between cannabinoids and hops. So is there a psychoactive component?
There's not. It's much closer to a hop than marijuana, but it is like a different character of hop supposedly. So I mean, it was some U.S. guy in the 80s or 90s found these hiking through New Mexico, started breeding them. Like, hey, these are making good things. Worked with some commercial growers, and now they're commercially available. So I know they're a little pricey, but I know a lot of the New England guys are using them. Dean Stewart-Wald's been using them quite a bit, and so he got me turned on to them last spring, and so I've only brewed one batch. But there's some good tropical notes, a lot of fruit and papaya and stuff like that going on. So I think Medusa is one.
I've got Dean committed for a talk on this stuff too.
Perfect.
It'll probably happen in like April, May timeframe.
He made one beer that I tried last spring. He was trying to do, when I went, it reminded me of 8 years ago when I tried to get a turkey every week from November through December because they were so cheap. I was like, we're gonna eat a turkey every week. It didn't last long. So in May, he was brewing all these IPAs, and he was brewing them like he got into like 5 weeks of brewing IPAs, and was like, I'm gonna brew an IPA all year. So it didn't last long.
But it lasted longer than, it lasted respectably long.
Yeah, respectively. Yeah, he made it further with IPAs than I made it with turkeys, but I don't know if you can compare those. But he had one that had these hops. It was a bunch of these Nuevo Mexicanos hops and lactose. So it was what would that be? Like a milkshake, whatever, like a New England milkshake. But it was delicious and fascinating. I mean, you got like the tropical flavors really popped with that lactose sweetness, and it blew my mind. I don't know what it was, but it was interesting. It's good.
So NHC is forbidden CBD-based beers.
Oh,
Competition.
I wonder if that's going to be a BJCP style in the future, though.
Surprised. I would expect that it would be a BA style before it becomes BJCP.
Well, I don't think it can be, right? Because it's illegal to commercially sell. You can't sell something that has alcohol and THC in it, and so there's a couple folks out there making non-alcoholic beers that have THC in it. That's the only way to do it right now.
I've never had one that I thought. It's always struck me as more of just a gimmick. Has anybody had one that's like?
So there's been a couple. There's been a couple of Zermigery articles recently, right? I think, or not. What's the other magazine? Brew.
Well, Tom's looking. My niece brought me a couple of cannabis beers from Colorado a year ago, and they were I don't know. I really didn't look to see what the alcohol content was, but they were making alcohol content and they're mixing it with THC.
Is my understanding though, is that's not legal, and I'm sure you get busted pretty quickly. The Zermigery article that I remember, I think that's where it was. Like they went through a number of different techniques because you gotta carbolize your THC or whatever. And they said the best was apparently some people, like in Colorado, you can just buy like a THC powder, like it's a little sachet of yeast, but it's THC, and like add that to your beer. They're like, this was the best, best performing as far as taste and effect and everything. So
I had a beer in Jamaica back in 1982 called Spingo, and it had that ingredient in it. In the Blue Hills of Jamaica, and man, oh man, you were flying after having that.
That sounds familiar.
Well, we served with brownies, right?
Sorry, not Spingo, it was Sputnik. It was Sputnik because it put you in orbit.
Okay.
Everywhere you go in Jamaica, there's brownies being sold on the corner.
Spingo is another, that's like an English beer.
yeah,
The Blue Anchor in Helston.
Spingo, is it Spingo? Is that the right word? I know what you're talking about, Andrew. Yeah, it's like a burnt nail derivative or something. Right?
It's was made at the
Stingo. Isn't it Stingo?
no Spingo was made down in Cornwall at the Blue Anchor in Helston, because I got the recipe right in like 1983 or something, 84. I got the recipe from them because I got to tour the facility, and that was right before everything took off with microbrewing. So I had a great idea, and I never had the execution.
Tom is thinking of what I was thinking of, Stingo. But it's funny that Spingo is also a thing, a beer. Of course it is. Anything you can think of, there is a beer that is based on that idea. Or if not,
If not, soon there will be.
right.
Hey, I have a question for Tom and Ron. You guys have any updates on the heavy hydrometer?
No, but it's a good question, and it's going to happen. And I guess we need to talk to and send something out.
You need to prod more.
So this was the plan.
You need to get the cattle prod. You need to get the cattle prod and just start.
Hey, I can do that. I'm retired.
Start poking,
but
poking people.
So we should probably, I mean, as like heavy hydrometer historically was held at the end of January before Winterfest came along, and then we sort of basically moved it to the end of February. We probably ought to have entries due at the end of the month, towards the end of the month, and we can figure out that, and then we can judge it within, 10 to 20 days after that or something. We'll have to pull that together. So it's going to be real fun.
I mean, people like to know when they're going to be judged. If they were due, I'm not sure how you guys decided to do it. Like I said, I'm more than happy to do it like the Braumeister. I can put the cooler out on my porch. People just drop them by, and myself and another person or two, whoever's not entering, would get them judged. So if they were due by, I'm looking at my calendar right now, if they were due on the 26th, Friday, or noon on the 27th, Saturday, I'm free that afternoon for judging.
We also going to have a virtual meeting where everybody drinks too many high alcohol beers and eats way too much cheese.
Yeah, it's that cheese that'll get you. You think it's the beers, but it's really the cheese.
Only if everyone's muted.
Yeah, yeah. I think you ought to be in charge of that part, Andrew.
That sounds good to me, Ron. 26th, 27th, I can put something out and just use, your details from your other competition.
Yeah, and then, and I mean, normally it's so cold. I want to do another Volks March. And I got some ideas on that to run by you, Dana.
First week in March. You never know.
Maybe early March, like Saturday the 13th.
Where do you figure the march would go?
Well, I got a couple options that I'm thinking of. I'll run by the Volk March admin. What's that, Joe? Wait, who said what?
I said I didn't even know about the last one
Oh, you didn't?
until it was happening.
It came up pretty quick.
Yeah, it sounded like it was kind of a last minute thing.
Yeah, it was kind of thrown together over a. There was a date kind of set for it, but it was sort of loose, and then I worked on a little more. And
well, it's one of those things where you had to take advantage of the weather. I mean, you had to act fast. It was beautiful.
That sounds good to me too. Saturday the 13th. That'd be fun.
Okay, and I'll tell you one of the routes I'm thinking of is a Monon Trail from Broad Ripple Brew Pub to Big Lug, or a half liter.
Mm-hmm.
It's 1.7.
I'm in.
That's a longer one. It's 1.7 miles each way, if I remember right. I have it all written down. I've put sort of several of them together, but that would be a nice walk, kind of right down the Monon Trail, and go from Broad Ripple Brew Pub, and there's also Sun King's Broad Ripple location right there by the trail. That could be a stop, but then hoof it down to half liter. They've got that big outdoor area.
Yeah, I like half liters outdoor better than Big Lug.
Yeah, I
didn't mean to say Big Lug. Big Lug's way too far north. I meant half liter south. And Broad Ripple's been doing a good job of keeping their outside area open like all the time.
Well,
so
plus you can
stay outside there. We can walk down to half liter, stay outside there, and then hoof it back. And it'd be about 3.5 mile walk with a stop on either end and in the middle.
Ron,
I'm sure my wife Barbara is too.
I think you ought to just go for it, Ron, and do the 20 miles of Center Point to Grand Junction with everything in between.
No, you're going to coordinate that one as a bike ride.
Yeah, I was just going to say we when the weather gets nicer, we should do this as a bike ride and grab a couple more places.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Well, Eric has experience with that.
Oh, heck yeah. We do it all the time.
Yeah,
Usually
Barbara
we end up doing about a 12-mile ride.
Barbara and I have done Broad Ripple to Grand Junction and back a few times.
It's uphill, but on the way home, though, is the problem. It's I forgot the elevation gain, but there's a surprising elevation gain from Grand Junction to downtown Indianapolis.
Really?
Yeah, this mountainous state that we live in.
Wow.
That's why they call it downtown.
Well,
time to say all right. So, what do you think? Hydrometer on at the end of the month?
That sounds good to me. Yeah.
So we would drop off at my house the week before, and so starting on the 22nd, they can be dropped off at my house. Just shoot me a text and say, check the box. I'll get them inside, get them refrigerated. And then on drop dead deadline is noon on Saturday. And there was one time Lee barely made it. Remember that, Lee?
Barely made it. I got your clock.
I still think you were 30 seconds late.
Your clock.
But noon on Saturday, And then assuming the weather's okay, I mean, obviously it's going to be in my garage. I got some heaters out there, but it can't be, 20 degrees probably. But assuming the weather's okay, then I'll coordinate with another judge or two, and we'll get them judged that afternoon. Then we could have a little Zoom session on the evening of the 27th to announce the winners and drink and eat cheese.
With the mute on.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
All right. And then tentatively, Dana, you and I can touch base on this, but maybe the 13th to do our next Volks March.
Yep, that's good. That's good. And I just need one more thing. For the newsletter, I'd like to put a recipe in there. If somebody here could just send me a recipe, if all of you send me
like cheesecake.
Yeah,
Cheesecake or
yeah,
something?
that's good. Any kind of recipe.
My raspberry stout cheesecake was in one of the printed newsletters many decades ago. I remember that. I ran across it recently. We used to have a printed, back before the internet.
I know. Do you have any hot buns?
We had a printed and mailed newsletter that Paul used to do.
Do you guys have any hot vines newsletters? Anything?
That was the name of it.
Yeah. Do you have any of those newsletters?
Yeah. Somewhere I ran across some the other day.
Yeah, we need to scan some and share them. That'd be fun to see.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I got to think about where I saw them now.
Well, if you find them, let me know. I'll scan them. We can put them up on the website. That might.
And I'm
be
sure Paul's probably got the whole record of them.
Okay.
So
send recipes. I don't care what kind of recipe it is. Cheesecake, beer.
I was just joking. But
You need your beef ramalai
yeah.
recipe.
Carbonade.
Oh, there we go.
Carbonade made with Saint Ronaldus.
Well, save that for the
Saint Ronaldus.
next quarter.
I'm still waiting for the good Saint Ronaldus vintage to come out.
Well, I kind of forgot
they've been-
all about that. I was moving some stuff around in the cellar, and I came across like a whole tub of big Saint Ronaldus bottles. I think I got 12 big bottles.
It might be getting good now.
That's what I'm thinking. I'd kind of forgotten about it. It's probably primo right now. Got some. There's a few small bottles in there too. I'll have to test one.
Hey, while we got the pause, Andrew, I've got two questions. What after the hams and what's on your shirt?
I don't think there's anything after the hams. Maybe a glass of water.
What's after the hams on the on your name?
It looks like
Oh, that's a shrug. So before, like, I was trying to justify my
crab dance.
my apropos beer choices. But by the time I got to the hams, I'm like, that's a shrug. Shrug.
That was a rune.
It does anyway. And what's the shirt? That sounds more interesting.
So this is a brewery in
Is that the Windmill Brewery, right?
yes,
The one in the windmill.
yeah, the one in the windmill. It's really cool.
I knew the name, but I couldn't place it. I didn't see the Amsterdam at the bottom that would have clued me in. And now I see the windmill behind the ostrich. Now
So he had to buy the shirt because he was so freaking stoned that he doesn't remember being there. But the
that's
shirt
probably not true.
Actually, it was the complete opposite of that. I was there with Madeline, with my 11-year-old, and other relatives. So Tina and Ellie weren't with us, and the other relatives were, let's just say, I mean, I like them, but our travel styles are not the same. And even Madeline was clued into this. Like, she was not digging the whole way we were doing things. And she was like, tomorrow, can we just, she'd already seen how in Amsterdam, how there was so much bicycling. And she said, tomorrow, can we just like rent bikes and ride around the city? And I'm like, yes. So before anybody else woke up, we got up, we took the train into Amsterdam, we rented bikes, we rode around, and this is one of the places we went, which was cool.
Oh, cool.
And it was chilly though, and that's why I ended up with the sweat. Normally, I don't really.
Well, I mean, that's I mean, as cool as the logo is, probably the more cool aspect is you bought a sweatshirt in Europe that actually fits you.
It's not like way too small.
That's not too hard for Andrew.
This is like a 3X.
Possible for me.
It's a 3X, I know, but usually like the 2Xs are, way too small for me.
They do like their clothing very trim. Yes,
It's ridiculous.
But that was we had a great time. We rode bikes around the city all day. That my relatives were mortified that I would allow my child to ride bikes in the city.
Wow.
They were saying this annoyed me because they immediately acted like, since Tina wasn't there, that I was clueless about like entertaining one of my children. And so they started suggesting things like, we should find a Build-A-Bear. I'm like, number one, there's no Build-A-Bears in Europe. Number two,
why?
We're in Europe. We're not going to do an American thing.
Wow.
You got me started.
You know what you should have said to him? You should have said, hey, you guys, you know what's fun? I just read that the legal getting stoned age here in Amsterdam is only 12.
Yeah. So
I don't know that that's true. It would have been worth it just to see their faces.
Right.
I was in Amsterdam probably 19 years ago, and a big beer bar there that's still a big beer bar is the Wildman, whatever. I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty famous beer bar. Bullen and I went there, and this is where I ordered an old Bruin. But is it an old Bruin? That there's two old Bruins? There's this sour old Bruin that we think of an old Bruin, and there's also the old Bruin that's like the beer that they serve in elementary school in the 90s. That's like a 1.2% beer. It's like the orange juice. And
correct.
The guy's like, you want that? And I'm like, yeah, I love old Bruins. And I get this like 1.2% alcohol sweet brown beer. Not what I was going for, but like why are they serving it in the Wildman? But
is it like wordy?
Only a little bit. I mean, it's like a dark mild of Belgium, maybe.
Right. Like your English grandmother used to drink, except
the grade school version in Belgium, which was maybe half the gravity of a dark mild, but yes. Anyway, I was disappointed, but it was fun.
Okay, guys, I think I'm done.
Yep.